When World War I ended, Britain's newly formed Royal Air Force faced a bleak future. Deemed unnecessary in peacetime, it was stripped of funding, and some wanted it gone altogether. Yet, it was about to be revitalized by an unlikely group of saviors, one for whom it didn't matter if the RAF didn't have any money. They had enough of their own. Formed over copious glasses of vintage port in the smoke-filled rooms of London's most exclusive gentlemen's club, 601 Squadron was a ragtag gang of thrill-seeking aristocrats and adventurers for whom flying was not a profession, but a high-adrenaline hobby. Notorious for their raucous behavior, flamboyant style, and disregard for discipline, the members of the so-called Millionaires Squadron had something no one else could offer the dying RAF: their own aircraft and a passionate determination to keep British military aviation alive. The military establishment called them dangerous madmen. Soon, both would be proven right. Background. By the end of 1918, Britain's Royal Air Force stood as the most powerful air service in the world. Formed in April that year through a merger of the Royal Flying Corps and the Royal Naval Air Service, it boasted over 20,000 aircraft and 300,000 personnel. Yet despite having played a crucial role in winning the Great War, once the conflict ended, nobody was entirely sure what role it should play, or if it should play one at all. Savage budget cuts reduced the RAF to just 35,000 personnel, barely 10% of its former strength. Meanwhile, viewing it as a temporary measure that had outstayed its welcome, the long-established Army and Navy questioned the need for a separate Air Force. It seemed the fledgling organization was destined to become little more than a minor footnote in military history. If it were to have any hope of survival, the RAF would need to reinvent itself. The solution came from Air Chief Marshal Hugh Trenchant, who envisioned an elite corps of civilian pilots serving their country in their spare time. His creation of the Auxiliary Air Force in 1924 would allow Britain to maintain air defense capability despite limited peacetime funding. There was, however, a catch. Pilots would need to obtain their licenses at their own expense, at a cost of £96, the equivalent of around £7,000 today. Formation. Fortunately, on London's St. James Street, there was one group of men for whom this expense would pose little obstacle. Within the opulent wooden-paneled confines of White's, the world's oldest private members' club, where men had once bet thousands of pounds on which raindrop would reach the bottom of a window first, Marshal Trenchant's vision would find some of its first champions. Foremost among them was Lord Edward Grosvenor, youngest son of the Duke of Westminster. A former French Foreign Legion soldier and hot air balloon racing pilot, with a penchant for fine Sicilian wine before breakfast, he cut a striking figure even among London's eccentric upper class. He walked with a silver-topped cane and kept a loaded sawn-off Purdy shotgun in each of his two Blériot monoplanes. A meeting between Grosvenor and several other well-heeled amateur aviation enthusiasts at White's would lead to the official founding of the 601 Squadron of the Auxiliary Air Force at RAF Northolt on October 14, 1925, making it one of the original 4 units of the force, along with the 600, 602, and 603 squadrons, all formed the same day. The Millionaires Squadron. When it came to recruitment, Grosvenor sought officers who would be, according to the squadron's historian, Tom Molson, quote, of sufficient presence not to be overawed by him, and of sufficient means not to be excluded from his favorite pastimes, eating, drinking, and whites. Any potential candidates would be taken to the club and plied with large quantities of port. If they could still behave like gentlemen while heavily intoxicated, they would be considered for the role. Though Grosvenor would step down as commander in 1926, before tragically passing away in an aviation accident 3 years later, the unit he created continued much in the same way as he had established it. Soon gaining the nickname of the Millionaires Squadron, or the Millionaires Mob, 601's ranks quickly filled with fast-living socialites from London's upper crust, many of whom already owned their own aircraft, and if they didn't, they'd simply buy one. Often, it would just represent the latest toy in an already impressive collection of vehicles. With so many members driving flashy sports cars, the parking lot at the squadron's RAF Northolt base regularly resembled a concours d'elegance. Meanwhile, 601 also attracted attention for its rowdy behavior. They would spend downtime playing polo on brand new Brow Superior motorcycles. Their initiation rituals were said to include one in which new recruits were coaxed into climbing onto a high shelf at the unit's Notting Hill headquarters before being drenched with soda water. Their rebellious nature even extended to their cavalier attitude to RAF uniform regulations. In acts of dandyish defiance, squadron members would wear red socks, add red silk linings to their tunics, and shun the required black ties for blue ones. However, despite their unruliness, the pilots of 601 Squadron were far more disciplined when it came to actual flying. At Northolt, they would undergo rigorous training, perfecting their aerobatics and altitude recovery skills. Some would spend considerable sums of money on customizing their aircraft, switching out the standard engines for more advanced ones in order to improve their performance. At a time when the RAF was fighting for its very survival, struggling to maintain its independence through public displays and air shows, the 601st and its fellow volunteer squadrons provided a crucial backbone of trained pilots and aircraft at minimal cost to the state. What might have seemed like an informal gathering of wealthy weekend aviators had in fact created a formidable reserve force of experienced pilots. 601 goes to war. As the 1930s wore on, and Europe's political situation grew more tense by the day, the Millionaires Squadron completed its transition from social club to full-blown fighting unit. When World War II broke out on September 1, 1939, Britain's military leadership knew it would need all the help it could get, including the auxiliary Air Force squadrons. The 601st was mobilized just days later, while their first missions involved protecting shipping lanes in the English Channel. By the summer of 1940, based at RAF Tangmere in West Sussex, the squadron found itself on the front line as the Luftwaffe began its attacks on shipping and coastal targets, initiating the Battle of Britain. Billy Fisk. Among the 601st pilots was 29-year-old William Billy Fisk, a remarkable American who embodied the squadron's pre-war spirit of well-to-do adventurers, a double Olympic gold medalist in bobsleigh and former Brooklands racing driver. Though the United States was still officially neutral at the time, Fisk refused to let that stop him from taking part in the war, claiming to be Canadian in order to join the RAF. He explained his decision in a letter to his sister, saying, quote, "The English have been damn good to me in good times, so naturally I feel I ought to help out if I can. There are absolutely no heroics in my motives. I'm probably twice as scared as the next man." Fisk flew 42 sorties between July and August 1940. On August 16th, the 601st Squadron was scrambled from Tangmere to intercept incoming German aircraft. In just 15 minutes of combat, the squadron destroyed 8 Junkers Ju-87 Stuka dive bombers, but Fisk's Hawker Hurricane was hit by return fire. A bullet had punctured his fuel tank, and flames began to spread through his aircraft. Despite severe burns to his hands and ankles, Fisk refused to abandon his Hurricane. Instead, he nursed the damaged fighter home, managing to glide the aircraft over a hedgerow and bring the aircraft in for landing at Tangmere. Though he had made it back to base, Fisk was trapped in the burning cockpit. Ambulance attendants rushed to extract him from the aircraft, which exploded shortly afterward. He was quickly taken to the Royal West Sussex Hospital in Chichester, but despite the medical team's efforts, he passed away as a result of surgical shock the next day, becoming the second US-born pilot to lose his life in World War II. William Henry Rhodes Morehouse. Meanwhile, the squadron's aristocratic origins were represented by men such as William Henry Rhodes Morehouse. Aviation ran in his blood. His father had been the first airman to receive the Victoria Cross, awarded posthumously after a daring bombing mission over Ypres in 1915. The younger Rhodes Morehouse earned his pilot's license at the prestigious Eton College at age 17, and soon proved himself a natural fighter pilot. His first victory came in May 1940, downing a Henkel HE-111 bomber over Brussels. Once the Battle of Britain got underway, his tally grew steadily. Through July and early August, he shared in the destruction of several Dornier Do-17s and claimed a Junkers Ju-88. On August 11th, he claimed 2 Messerschmitt Bf-109s, but the day brought bitter tragedy. His brother-in-law and fellow squadron member, Dick Dimitriati, was shot down in action over Portland. Despite the devastating personal loss, Rhodes Morehouse continued to fight with determination. By early September, he had claimed 9 victories and was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross at Buckingham Palace. However, just 3 days after receiving the medal, Rhodes Morehouse made the ultimate sacrifice when his Hurricane was hit by fire from Bf-109s over Tunbridge Wells, sending his aircraft diving vertically into the ground. New blood, new theaters. The loss of a heroic ace like Rhodes Morehouse was a major blow to 601st Squadron. He had also been one of the few remaining pre-war members of the unit. The day after his passing, the surviving pilots were withdrawn to Exeter to rest, while replacements were sought. In wartime, the squadron's leadership could no longer afford to draw new recruits from the limited circle of high society. Now, the 601st would begin to integrate members from different walks of life in all parts of the Commonwealth, its peacetime exclusivity gradually fading away. Yet, 601st Squadron's effectiveness only increased. Under squadron leader Sir Archibald Hope, they developed aggressive combat tactics that earned them a fearsome reputation, claiming 100 victories by the end of the Battle of Britain, a considerable score for a unit once seen as more of a drinking club than a serious fighter squadron. Soon, this reinvigorated version of the 601st would find itself bound for new horizons. In April 1942, they arrived at RAF Lucca in Malta, where they spent 2 months flying Spitfires as they defended the strategically crucial Mediterranean island during its siege by Axis forces. From there, the squadron moved to Egypt, beginning an odyssey that would see them operate from dozens of different bases as they followed the advancing Allied armies. They flew from primitive desert airstrips, many little more than cleared patches of sand, as they supported Montgomery's 8th Army. At the Battle of El Alamein, their Spitfires provided crucial air cover, helping secure one of the war's turning points. The advance continued through Libya and into Tunisia. Under Wing Commander Widge Gleed of 244 Wing, they flew alongside other RAF squadrons as part of the Desert Air Force, moving from one captured airfield to another as the Allies pushed the Axis forces westward. In July 1943, they participated in Operation Husky, the invasion of Sicily, moving first to Pacino, then to Cassibile and Lentini west. As the Allies pushed into mainland Italy, the 601st continued to provide air support for the advancing ground forces. The mountainous Italian terrain posed new challenges, but the squadron adapted as they supported operations at Anzio and along the Gustav Line. By the war's end, the 601st's battle honors told the story of their remarkable journey across Europe and North Africa. Rising above its former reputation as an undisciplined bunch of privileged hellraisers, the squadron had more than proven it was a force to be reckoned with, amassing an impressive total of 220 confirmed victories and 89 probables. Post-war legacy. After victory in Europe, 601st's remarkable wartime journey seemed complete. But in 1946, the unit was reformed at RAF Hendon under squadron leader the Honorable Max Aitken, a distinguished pilot who had claimed 16 victories during the war. The squadron entered the Jet Age, trading their Spitfires first for de Havilland Vampires and later for twin-engine Gloucester Meteors. However, in 1957, along with all other Royal Auxiliary Air Force units, 601st Squadron fell victim to government defense cuts. Ironically, one of the same factors that had actually triggered its creation over 30 years before. For decades, it seemed the story of the legendary Millionaires Squadron had ended. Yet in 2017, 60 years after its disbandment, the unit was reborn with a new mission. Today's 601st Squadron serves as a specialist unit of the Royal Auxiliary Air Force, connecting the RAF with leaders from industry, academia, and research. The modern squadron may be far removed from the wealthy young aviators who gathered at White's Club in 1925, but they maintain the innovative spirit of their founders.